I would like to share with you my experience on the Indian Pacific in February 2019. I flew to Perth from the East Coast and got on the train there in Perth. When I arrived at the check-in, I was handed a letter. The letter stated that there was a derailment. I believe it was on the South Australian side, and we had two options. The first option was get you a full refund, and the second one was to continue the journey, and we'd only have see about half the journey. I sat down and had a look at it, and I thought, well, with the loss of flights, the rebooking of flights, which is very expensive when you book it a few hours before, and also the hotel, so it was going to cost me about $1,200. So I elected to continue the journey, hoping that the rail may have been fixed and we could to do the trip. I collected my bags and proceeded to my cabin. As I entered the carriage and went towards my cabin, I was quite shocked to find that it wasn't a cabin. It was some sort of a compartment with a bed in it and a seat. It was very small. The bed was about 2 foot wide, and if you look on a site on YouTube, it reads Indian Pacific, January the 18th, Gold Class Service, sleeper cabin, and that'll sort of, there's someone there that actually pans around and shows you the cabin. So it was a shared bathroom and shower at the end of the cabin, and I really felt that the toilet and shower was about twice as big as my compartment. We were supposed to leave at about 10 o'clock, but we never left till 12. We proceeded to Kalgoorlie, and we got there in the late afternoon. We had done a short excursion, then they shoved us back into the holding yard, and we stayed there the night. The next morning we done another excursion around Kalgoorlie, which was okay, quite interesting. And then from then on we proceeded to the airport, where they flew us from Kalgoorlie direct to Adelaide. Now we stayed there quite a few hours waiting for the flights. We finally got on the flights, and we proceeded to Adelaide. When we got to Adelaide in the late afternoon, the itinerary said that we'd have a meal at the restaurant. So we boarded the buses, and it took us about over an hour to get to the restaurant. The restaurant was quite nice. It had a nice view over the ocean. One thing I thought was unusual, that there was about 10 people to a table, and they sort of brought out these 3 plates with a type of finger food on it. And this happened about 3 or 4 times with similar type of food. And someone said to the waitress, "Look, you've only given us 3 plates. Can we have extra plates?" Because everyone was sort of grabbing the food and there's none left. So the waitress said, "Oh no, that's all we give, only 3 plates to a table." So that was a little bit disappointing. We left there about 9:30 and went back to the train, which was the Garn. The Garn goes from Adelaide to Darwin, and we stayed there overnight. And next morning we done an excursion around Adelaide, the actual city itself. At about mid-morning, late morning, we back on the train. We headed towards Broken Hill, where we had a sort of a cabaret type of thing there for about an hour and a half, and then we proceeded on to Sydney, and that was a sort of an overnight trip. Now, one thing I would like to point out, that the line from Adelaide to Sydney, in my idea, is quite horrendous. The line is very rough. You get shaken from side to side and up and down, and I really thought it was similar to a rail line in like India, one of those third world countries. So we got to the Blue Mountains, which I was quite excited because I wanted to see the Blue Mountains. We hopped off the train continued on because it couldn't stop on the main line, and they bussed us to the Blue Mountains where the cable cars was, and to sort of add wound to injury, that was all fogged out and we never saw much at all, so that was another disappointment for the trip. We had lunch there and went back on the buses to the railway station and hopped on a local train that took us on to Sydney, where we collected our bags and went on our ways back home. And that was the end of the trip. So we paid our full fare and we only got half a journey, so that was another thing that was very disappointing. Another thing I'd like to point out too, that the train never stops really, only at certain places. So when you leave Perth, the train doesn't stop at night, so you really miss most of the trip anyway, if in the case that we did do the full trip. So you're only seeing a little bit during the day, and then night time you're missing out on all that. And I paid about $2,300 for the single cab, so-called cab, and the gold class, and I only got half the journey. So I contacted Southern Rail a couple of times and they never even replied to my letters or anything like that. So of course the thing is, you pay your money and if something goes wrong with the line or something, well then you really lose out, because whether you continue the journey or get a refund, it's still going to cost you money, because they point out that they're not going to pay you for flights or anything. So at the end of the day, you lose and Great Southern Rail don't. And I really feel sorry for the people who go up to the platinum class and pay anything up to $6,000 or $7,000, and they only get half the journey. So that's about it for my experience on the Indian Pacific. I was very disappointed, and I personally wouldn't do it again. I did meet one tourist on there from Canada, America, and he said that North America and Canada, you can do a similar trip for about $700. So that's a big difference. So I just thought I'd share my experience, and I hope you enjoyed it and you can get something out of it. Thank you.